our cause here for our community. Sorry, I've got a threat violation found on the screen here. I'm going to get rid of that. Hi guys, my name is Melissa. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Awaken. Has anybody here ever been to a training on sex trafficking, human trafficking, prostitution before? Let's see. So there's a few that haven't. Okay. So we're going to try to cover a lot today, and it's more than you may know what to do with. We're also starting your day off, so let me give you the disclaimer. This is information that might ruin your day. However, we also don't like to leave people hopeless, and we also don't like to leave people feeling like this is insurmountable and no opportunity to overcome it, because it's not true. This thing actually, with a community and a collective response, we have incredible opportunities to have impact here in Washoe County. And I have seen it. We started Awaken. I started working with this population in 2010. Started studying the issue in 2009, working with the population in 2010. And I can't tell you how exponentially changed our community is today than it was then. So we really are making a difference. And the more people and the more entities you have involved, the more difference you can see change happen. And so it's incredible to have you here. For those of you that have never been a part of these trainings, the content, again, it can be heavy, but please know it actually leaves us much better off. I was talking to Shelby earlier, and I was remembering this example I used to use. Have any of you ever bought a car and then you suddenly realize oh, I didn't realize, so she bought a Subaru. She's like, now I realize there's a lot of Subarus. But you don't notice all the Subarus until you buy the Subaru. This is what this is. When you start to look at this, you never realized how prevalent it is. But it's here, it's in our community, and you're going to start to see it after this, which leads to change. If we don't recognize it and we don't see it, there's no change available for us. So that's the good news that we'll be able to end with. So Awaken, our mission, we're a local nonprofit, started officially in 2011. We seek to increase awareness and education around commercial sexual exploitation. The reason we use that term, we don't use sex trafficking, we don't just say prostitution, because a lot of the women don't self-identify as victims, and we don't want to create a barrier for services. So we have no reason, there's no criteria for them to identify as having a trafficker, being a victim of anything. They simply have to say, yep, I've been in the life, I've been in the game, I've been on the streets, whatever that is for them, whatever their language is what we use to assess criteria for services for Awaken. So commercial sexual exploitation just means you've had a sex act in exchange for anything of value, and you are fit for criteria for services from Awaken. So that's it. And to provide housing and restorations for its victims. We just in January opened our first transitional house. It's a long-term 2-year transitional house. We've got 4 residents in there. We've got room for 1 more. We hope to open more homes. We want to keep it in smaller groups. I don't even know that many 5 healthy women that want to live under one roof together, let alone 7, 10, 20, right? So for this population, we're going to try. Our goal is to keep that cottage style, keep it so it's really individualized care, long-term for up to 2 years. We do also have a drop-in center, and we also do a lot of case management, counseling, mentorship, and ongoing services to work with them as well. All right, so what I want to first do is kick off with a video. I think one of the things we'd have to first overcome is the stigma and what we think prostitution is. And the reason I think this is important is because when you're face-to-face with a woman who does not know how to identify as a victim, is not interested in identifying as a victim, is had years of fight or flight, years of survival, years of walls and defenses, it is really easy to brush them off and to not have any kind of empathy or compassion and see past the defenses they come in with, which is typically, here it's going to be like a wounded animal. And so to get past that, I want to play this video to show this, just to help.
Most of us today have heard stories of the millions of women and children forced into prostitution through human trafficking. We're aware and we're grieved. But what about those women in prostitution who weren't trafficked? Did those women willfully choose prostitution? And are they as empowered, independent, and sexually liberated as many would have us believe? What we've come to see through years of research and thousands of conversations with prostituted women across the world is a very different picture of prostitution. And the truth of this picture is that prostitution can be more accurately described as the choice of those with the fewest choices. See, nearly without fail, women enter prostitution from a position of vulnerability. Many women, quote unquote, choose prostitution as underage children, some as young as 12. This so-called choice is often heavily influenced by prior sexual abuse. It is influenced by the unrelenting messages from the media, pop culture, and society that communicate that a woman's primary value is her sex appeal. Many prostituted women and children come from families broken by poverty, addiction, and mental illness. Many are homeless, orphaned, refugees, or suffer some form of social disadvantage. One formerly prostituted woman wrote about the sentiment of choosing prostitution. She said, "When I think about my choices, they were simply these: have men on and inside them, or continue to suffer homelessness and hunger. Take your pick, make your choice." Prostitution preys upon the most vulnerable in our society, coercing individuals through life circumstances to trade sex for the hope of a better life, or even to simply survive. If this is the truth of prostitution, then prostitution is not a choice. If we truly care about the dignity, safety, and empowerment of women and children, then we must fight for a world without prostitution. We must fight for a world where our most vulnerable are offered real choices. And we're asking you to choose this fight. Share this video. Tell the world the truth about prostitution.
So this is another reason as to why this is a really important conversation to have. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world today. The reason it's growing faster, there's 3 major criminal enterprises around the world. So you got human trafficking. Do you guys think of the other 2?
Drug trafficking.
Drugs.
Guns.
Don't know about that one, yeah. Guns, weapons, arms. So arms dealing. So think about those and the selling of them, the trafficking of them. This one is more profitable than all the others. Reason why, there's quite a few reasons. One, risk reward. It's really low risk to traffic a human being that's in love with you. It's really low risk to traffic a human being that's not going to prosecute against you. And it's really high reward. And when laws aren't caught up, to be able to have these kinds of successful prosecutions, task force aren't intact to go after them, money's not allocated to make it a priority. When a state and a community doesn't make this a top priority for the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, they run rampant. I've done work in prisons and they are actually saying, we know Nevada's tough on drugs, so you gotta be careful. We know they are not tough on the trafficking of women and children, so we get to go there and reap the reward. They know that. That is the image and the reputation of Nevada, unfortunately, and if they know it, it means we've gotta be double down, ready to help, because that means the victims are here, because there is a demand for them in Nevada. So that's how this works. So we'll get into some of the data later. The other reason this is the highest valued is the resale. You sell a drug once, you sell a weapon once, you can own and resell a woman over and over and over again, or a child. So that toxic combination has made this the fastest growing criminal enterprise around the world today. So Nevada, we asked a university, Creighton University, to do a prevalence study on Nevada as well as our own Northern Nevada community. Adjusted for population, Nevada has the highest rates of an illegal sex trade. This is not including brothels. Illegal sex trade, the highest rate of an illegal sex trade than any other state in our country. So it is here. Our state is #1 in the nation. It is 63% higher than the next highest state. So the prevalence is here, and we are unfortunately at the top. So the ads. So these were pulled off of advertisements online where they're being bought and sold. And so when you look at the ads, they will market to the taste of consumers. They provide insights into the sex buyers, those who are buying the women and children for the purposes of sex. And that is what creates the market. So the ads are showing us, want some fun tonight? Sexy, young, limber kitty wants to play. Young, sexy, petite, just turned 18. These ads are showing there's a full 72% have at least some indicator of being young with the potential of being underage and working with a trafficker. So a lot of them are gonna be young. They're gonna feel young, they might not look young, but you're gonna recognize a youthfulness to them. And that is something worth looking at. So who are the victims? It could be anybody, to be honest with you. But what's the demand for in Nevada is youthfulness. We're now ranked in the top 10 for the youthfulness of victims of trafficking in the country. So we have our youth to really protect and start to look for. In our own community, we did a heat map. We asked them to study the prevalence just in the whole northern Nevada area and a little bit of California with this section. Reno Sparks, on any given month, they identified 900 to 1,000 women and children being sold on that one website. On any given month. In this whole area, it's 1,500. On any given month, you're gonna find that. In the state of Nevada, it's 20,000 annually. It would fill up the entire student body population of UNR. That's the prevalence of why this is so important to address and to look at. Okay, so some data about our community. Vulnerabilities. You guys, we're at the part where I can ruin your day. We're gonna get past this, all right? Okay, Washoe County, so in Nevada, we're 47th in overall child well-being. In Washoe County, 16,554 live below the poverty line. That's a vulnerability, right? You have a need, somebody's coming in with the help. That looks like, I got some opportunity for you to never go in need again. That's the way these guys are gonna approach them. Over 3,000 students in Washoe County experienced homelessness. That's another vulnerability. 300 lived on the streets or couch surfing. And in Washoe County last year, they had 492 substantiated cases of child abuse and neglect last year alone. All of these are vulnerabilities for trafficking. All of them. So it is here in our community. Why it's important to do this in a hospital setting. Any other referral source, if they're coming to Awaken, sometimes they're referred by their friends that got out of the life. And they're like, you gotta come do this. That's like the best referral system we've ever seen. Occasionally they're coming in because they really don't want to keep living like this. More often than not, we're getting referrals from other agencies. Often law enforcement, hospitals, schools, social workers. That's what we seem to find. Detox, rehabs, those types of places. What's really interesting is in a hospital setting, you are the ones they're running to freely. They are freely coming to you. They want to be here and they want your help. They don't necessarily want your help for being trafficked or exploited. They want your help because they're hurting physically and you can help them. And that puts you in a unique opportunity that none of the others of us have. None of us. So you guys are truly frontline people. This is for medical providers. The Emergency Nurses Association found that 88% of trafficking victims seek medical treatment during their victimization. The reason hospitals are going to need to be the frontline providers is because of all of the harm that happens in prostitution and trafficking. All of the physical harm, the mental health harm, the trauma, the brain injury, the violence that takes place. That's why this is so important. So 88% of them have come into the ER. I don't know 88% of any other population in the group that's going to hit any other one agency or entity. I really don't. So unique. 68% of them seek treatment in the emergency room. And then a 2017 survey, here's the potential we have. They reported that only 3% of survivors who accessed the healthcare had actually been provided with information and resources about human trafficking while they were at the healthcare provider. So this is truly an untapped people group to assess, identify, and then offer resources to. The potential here is phenomenal. Okay, so what to look for? Nearly all, 92.2% of trafficked women in one study reported all of this: being shot, strangled, burned, beaten, stabbed, punched. So this is the type of violence that they're incurring, that you are going to see them coming in with. They are not. Actually, I don't know for sure. Has anybody ever had a patient come in and say, I'm here because I'm a victim of trafficking? Never. Right? We're like the only organization that might come in and say that if you work with any kind of DV or sexual assault, violence, so just to come to Awaken, they're going to say I've at least been in the life. They certainly don't have to say they've been a victim. They're going to say they've been in the life. They're going to own that for this, but there's not many other places they're going to be able to do that other than a service provider. Many of the victims had multiple forms of violence. American Journal of Epidemiology, that one does not roll off my tongue, said 55% report suffering from PTSD, 42% had attempted suicide at least once. So you might see some depression, some hopelessness. If they've come in with PTSD, how might they behave when you see them? Have you ever had somebody
Withdrawn and anxious.
withdrawn and anxious? Jumpy? So that fight or flight kind of thing, right? Avoidant. It sounds like what you're saying is maybe avoidant, nervous, yeah. Any other thoughts what this could look like, what these words play out and show up as in a person?
A natural lack of trust.
Yep, absolutely. They're traumatized. They're not going to trust anyone. When it's a lot of the studies of who buys sex from women and children, half of them, it's authority figures that should be trusted. And so they've already ruined trust for anybody that is a healthy person. They've already ruined it for all of us. So that's important to remember. They genuinely have no reason to trust us. We shouldn't assume they should to be able to help them. We got to get past that. We got to get past the insults and the cursing and the wounded animals. Sometimes the trauma brings up in them when we see them. 47% of young prostituted women reported being raped by pimps or buyers. For us, that number is low, actually. We see the sexual assault piece really high. 42% reported being first sold under the age of 18 and had been victims of customer-related or pimp-related violence and had been to the ER room at least once. So when looking at all of these things, keep this in mind. These are often symptoms of something more, and it could be prostitution, trafficking, exploitation. Women in prostitution, they have the highest rates of rape, physical assault, or homicide of any woman ever studied. So again, you're going to see them. This is where they're going to show up at some point in their exploitation. Okay, they do not self-identify as victims. We've established that, right? Okay, so they may not ask for help, and here's some reasons why. They might blame themselves. Have you talked to women in domestic violence, sexual assault that stay with their perpetrator, their abuser? What do they sound like? Have you ever had a friend who just had a bad boyfriend? And you're like, you gotta dump him. How effective is that? Nah, you lose friends over it, right? So this is like that on a whole different level of the spectrum of attachment and trauma bonding and the things that we need to be really mindful of. That is not the time and the place to try to convince them of how bad he is. It will close them off and they will defend him, and that will then bring a gap further in between us. So the youth, they may view commercial sex work as a survivor as a way to survive and escape abuse and neglect in the home. For the youth, they're often leaving something thinking this is at least better than what I had. At least he cares about me. At least he feeds me. One of the youth we work with, she was talking about how much he loves her and how much he cares for her, and the food's good. And we asked, well, what is the food? So she's staying, with this guy who's letting her live with them. This is a while back. And what she was boasting about, what was a symbol of love, was top ramen. So that's the bar that has been set for love in her life, to view that, right? That's all he had to do is provide a couch and top ramen. I really hope as a community we can beat that. I really hope if that's the competition, we can at least go further and provide for these kids. All right, due to prior abuse, They may not see a difference between a healthy and an abusive or an exploitive relationship. So that's this girl. That's top ramen. That's what that tells you, is her history is not indicative of what love in form of food and comfort and nurturing looks like, right? That's what that's going to be pretty telling about. Okay, for assessing, patient and client care staff, they should assess all vulnerable persons. So this is for the types of concerns. So children and youth. Do you know one of the main reasons children and youth are vulnerable right now? Other than the headliners we already had, fastest growing criminal enterprise, highest profitability, low risk, high reward, right?
Social media.
Other than that, social media. So much of our recruiting is taking place on social media. And it's this sort of like, sometimes it's a catfish experience, sometimes it's not. But these are not introductions where they come in with the shirt that says, I'm gonna pimp you out. That is not the introduction, and that is not how the grooming happens. So we had one young lady, she got hit up on DM'd and was like, hey, you're cute. And she looked at the profile, and it was like an older dude, not cute. She ignored it, right? Because that's it. If he's not good looking, she's not gonna DM a stranger back. So not too much longer, she gets another DM. Hey, she looks at the profile, direct message, sorry. A direct message, like a private message on your social media accounts, your Instagram, yeah, your not iMessage, what's the Facebook Messenger, something like that. So she gets hit up again.
Sorry, I'm old.
Yeah, no worries. She gets hit up again. There are so many things they say that I have no idea what they're saying. So I hear you. And she looks at the profile of this one, and he is cute. Doesn't matter that he's a stranger, he's cute. And if you know anything about stages of development, these kids, that peer stuff is so much stronger than the risk involved, the desire to belong, to be a part of something. Their frontal lobes are not fully formed, they're not thinking cause and effect, this could lead to me being trafficked. They're not thinking that way. I didn't. Did any of you guys think that way growing up? No, we're like wired for risk-taking, novelty-seeking, that's what's happening, belonging. And so they get hit up by a cute guy that says, hey, the whole social media culture says, hey back. So do these girls. They talked for ages. These guys will spend time. There's a study done of traffickers in Canada. They were in prison, and they said, how long does it take you from beginning to end to take a good girl from a good home with no prior abuse and neglect? They said, max 3 months. Max 3 months to get her fully loyal and devoted to me and trafficking. And then she'll start recruiting others. That's it. They are systematically deteriorating. They write books on it, they write articles on it, they sing about it, they ingrate it in the culture. We had one girl, she came out of legal prostitution, and she said, these pimps, they love coming to Nevada because Nevada's laws have done half the work for them. That's what's happening. The normalization has already done the work for these girls to then be raised up thinking it's probably not that bad. So they then see this, it's already normal, doesn't feel weird, it's a cute guy, social media, this is how you behave when you're in middle school now. So they chat and they chat and they chat. After a period of time, hey, what's she doing? I wanted to go to the grocery store, couldn't get there. Hey, I'll give you a ride. Parents aren't home, comes pick her up. In the car with him, guess who's there? The first older dude that tried to hit her up. It was a complete tactic strategically to recruit, to groom, recruit, and then get her in. He did the work for the trafficker. So they're in the car together. The cute guy has an excuse. He has to leave. They end up staying in touch. The older guy, then she built trust by association with the cute guy. You would think it has the opposite effect. It did not. She ended up being trafficked by him. It works. These kids are so vulnerable. So just youth, honestly, is still vulnerability. Anybody in commercial sex work is vulnerable for this. Whether they say this is legal, they choose it, they're empowered, they're still vulnerable, and it is still worth looking at. Undocumented immigrants, persons struggling with homelessness, addiction, people lacking in family or community support, young mothers, and foreign nationals. These are often things that you can look at. Okay, some red flags. patients with a controlling companion. Are you guys already familiar with this kind of training? Right? Anything? Bueller? Are you familiar with any kind of like controlling companion type of training? The situation, it could be DV, right? Okay. So a controlling companion is worth looking at. And we're gonna talk after this. Hospital protocol is gonna give you some like systems on how to deal with this and what to do in a situation like that. So a companion who refuses to leave the patient's side. Patients not speaking for themselves. Has anybody come across something like this in the hospital setting? Okay, so you're seeing some of these behaviors. Patients with signs of medical and physical neglect. Patients who are submissive, fearful, hypervigilant, and uncooperative. Again, the victimization comes up in incredible defense mechanisms and survivor mechanisms. And their need to survive often means you can't know what's really happening to me. And so they're not going to be cooperative many times, especially if it's done inappropriately and you're like, dude, you got to get away from him, like we talked about earlier. It's not typically the method that works unless they say they need that. And then you meet them where they at. Has anybody ever learned stages of change? Look into stages of change. That's how you learn to talk to them in their different stages. It's really quick. You got pre-contemplation, meaning if I smoke and I don't realize it's a problem, and you come at me with, here, I'm taking you to this doctor to get you to quit smoking, and I'm like, it's not even a problem, what are you talking about? Pre-contemplation, not on my radar. Contemplation, I have heard smoking might cause harm. I am just thinking about it, I'm only contemplating. So you learn to start to speak to somebody in a contemplative thing, like, I wonder if that's why you cough all the time. You know how you're talking about you can't breathe sometimes? I don't know, you think that's got anything to do with it? You just start wondering. You get them curious. The whole point is to not be their frontal lobe for them, to let them activate their frontal lobe and do that thinking. Do you know how much more effective it is when you figure it out than somebody tells you? It's so much more effective. So you just open up the curiosity to try to get them one step further into the stages of change. So pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation. Oh crap, I might need to start looking into patches, quitting, groups, something like that. I'm preparing now for change. And then you've got action. I've changed, and that can go up to about 3 months, and then you're in maintenance. Change has happened, and now you're there. So when you talk to somebody in a place of maintenance and action, and their pre-contemplation, contemplation, all it does, the human behavior says, if you fight for this, I'm going to go this way. We're just wired to oppose that when we're not ready to change. When we're ready to change, it's totally different. We're aligned together, going in the same direction. So it's really important to understand that when we're talking to women, that we are identifying as at risk, vulnerable, or even being trafficked, exploited, to make sure we're not telling them that. Because their survival says, you're not safe and I gotta go. All right, Journal of Emergency Nursing Study developed these guidelines for practice. And you guys are gonna go into further. I'm just gonna kind of throw a few out just to reinforce what you're gonna do again later. Because repetition is always really helpful. Do you feel safe? You're just gonna ask the question. You notice the difference if I say to you, do you feel safe? Versus you're not safe. It's totally different. Do you feel safe? They get to decide that for themselves. Where do you eat and sleep? What are the conditions like? You're just talking. You're just having a conversation in a setting that you have figured out. We're in a place now in a time that this is appropriate. Do you have any identification? Oftentimes they're holding that for them. So you're not going to have them get it. Because if you don't have identification, do you have any opportunity for freedom? You can't do anything without your identification, can you? Try it. I had to get by one time. I forgot my driver's license. Actually, I lost it. I lose it all the time. I had the Costco, the city Visa. It was the only credit card I could use because it had my picture on the back. Like, you can't do anything without it. But without that, again, if I have nothing, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not seeing anything. I can't get a hotel room. I can't get a bus pass. I can't do anything to get anything for myself. Is anyone hurting you, threatening you? Does someone tell you what to say today? Do you feel safe at home? Do you feel safe at school? With your friends? Your boyfriend? Just questions, see how they respond. You get to work through it, you get to see. Is anyone hurting or threatening your family? I had a woman, she was doing really, really well. She had a lot of sobriety. I was running a group, this back in the day when I was running a group out of step 2 for women in prostitution. She was doing really, really well, working to get her kids back. She graduated out, she ended up getting housing downtown, right where it was right in the hot spot of it. Her traffickers were looking for her, and she knew it, but that was where she ended up going. Another client ran into her on the streets, and she had been gang raped, she had been a broken elbow, she had been beaten, burn marks all over her. And she said, just come with me right now, just come with me. And she was like, I can't. They said, why? She said, because they just showed me recent photos of my children. I haven't even seen my children in years, and they have photos, current photos of my children, and told me if I don't get this quota by the end of the day so we can get out of town, what they're gonna do to my children. So the question about the threats of family is significant. She doesn't even consider the threats to herself. She considers those to her children being worth noticing and this for. She would do anything for them. Is anyone wanting you to have sex with others for money? For food, clothes? Because it doesn't always have to be money. It could be for a place to stay. It could be for anything of value. Has anyone ever taken a photo of you? This one's really important and often gets missed. I never even considered this till we did a training with an FBI victim specialist, and she was like, this one, we need to make sure we're asking, has anyone ever taken a photo of you that made you feel uncomfortable? Has anyone ever considered asking that? Because so much of the pornography that's happening now, and then the ads that are getting placed online, this is how that happens. So just asking about this is important. Was it posted on a website, an ad, these types of questions, and you can figure out where to go from there based on that answer. So indications of trauma bonding. This is what makes our job even harder, the trauma bonding, right? Because if you're trauma bonded, are you bonding to healthy people? So are you familiar and comfortable to a bond to a healthy person? So is it likely you're going to open up to a healthy person when you're bonded so strongly to your perpetrator? So here's what it looks like, because it feels frustrating and it feels like you're hitting a wall. I know she needs help. Why won't she just let me help her, right? Because that's what we might experience it as. So they're going to think, they're going to be hypervigilant to the exploiter's needs. This is what you can look for. They're going to seek to keep their exploiter happy to decrease later violence. That's what they're doing. They're not thinking I need help right now. They're thinking, how do I get out of getting beat later when I go home? They're going to see him as the good guy. They're going to see you as the bad guy. They're going to see him as the protector. They're going to see you as a threat. They're going to see the world from his perspective, not yours, not hers. It's going to come from, what is he going to think about me if I say this? What is he going to think of me if I do this? That's their focus. Negative feelings towards family, friends, anybody essentially that's healthy, that's helping, wants to help them get out, especially